arms to the sun. You feel the warmth of the rays, and then you know you're alive, and you don't have to be afraid of anything, cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is.
Welcome to the Bassline. Rosie Marshall is an incredible activist residing in Australia. She organizes the Vax Bus, which tours Australia spreading the word about the dangers of vaccines and gathering the first-hand accounts of vaccine injury victims. I am truly privileged to welcome to the Bassline the remarkable Rosie Marshall. How are you this morning, Rosie?
Jeremiah, I'm very well, thank you.
Just a few announcements here before we get into this incredible discussion with an incredible guest. We have another 5-8 jam session lined up for the final Sunday of this month. That is Sunday, January 25th at Rock Mill Fitness. And we would love to see you there. Rock Mill is an incredible venue. It is a place where we are experimenting with this new and improved tuning of our musical instruments to the 5-8 frequency, and we'd really love to see you there. It's a new kind of band, it's a new kind of sound, and we're trying to make a new scene in New York City where so much is just disappearing. We're trying to bring back that old creative New York feeling that is so hard to come by in this city these days. But also, we of course have my Substack, which I really would love for you to check out. I just completed a Substack called 100 Questions for Pro-Vaxxers, and I would love for you to check out that Substack. Please make memes out of the questions. Please use those questions to engage other people in dialogue. And of course, you can schedule a chess lesson with me. RemoteLearningChess.com is my company. So please mention the Bassline and you get a Bassline discount, a PRN discount. And I would love to share with you the Game of Kings and the King of Games. And of course, you could go to JeremiahHosea.com, get the theme song of this show or other original works. And those are various ways you can support this program, which very much needs your support. I'm an independent journalist. This is a grassroots effort. I have 2 young children to feed, and your contributions in any form help keep the wagon wheel rolling. So all that being said, it's really an incredible time in this movement right now. We have the documentary An Inconvenient Study, which was released recently. And there's more talk about those kinds of studies that are coming out where now we actually have 12 vaxxed versus unvaxxed studies, and across 22 different health categories in all 12 studies, the unvaccinated are doing better. And I don't just mean COVID vaccines. I mean all of your so-called tried and true traditional vaccines. They appear to be negative efficacy. They are harmful interventions, and we have to stop this runaway train of the state saying you have to take these injections. Your children need to take these injections to go to school, to participate in after-school activities, to participate in social life. It's an absolute outrage that we're being told we have to be injected with a bunch of toxic stuff that can lead to all kinds of health problems, but it's for the common good or whatever their argument is. Because, of course, it's totally absurd to say, okay, I have a vaccine and I'm protected, but I'm not protected unless you take a vaccine too. That's sort of like the same thing to me as saying, I own a Ferrari, but I don't own a Ferrari unless you have a Ferrari. Like where I parked my Ferrari, the car won't be there unless you have a Ferrari as well. If you have a good product, it's a good product, right? You don't need someone else to have the product that you have for what you own to work. That doesn't really make sense. But all that being said, I want to get right into this discussion with our incredible guest, Rosie Marshall. Now, Rosie, before we get a little bit of background about you and your personal story, could you jump right into telling us about this incredible activism you're doing with the Vax Bus in Australia? What inspired the Vax Bus, and what is the mission of the Vax Bus?
Well, I've actually got a two-pronged approach to what's been going on here. I've been very involved and probably one of the biggest proponent of the Forest of the Fallen. That's really been my particular direction. However, as you have said, I do all the interviews on the Vax Bus, which has branched out from my experience. The Vax Bus is the most wonderful intervention in this situation. It was started by a woman called Meryl Dorey, and in fact, I'm not responsible. I've just become a very active person with the Vax Bus, and I've done 2 tours. I intend to do a 3rd tour going across Australia to Perth this coming year, but that's going to be a huge mission. The Vax Bus is very much modelled on the Vax Bus the Children's Health Defence do. In fact, we're very closely aligned with CHD, and we were lucky enough to have Polly Tommy and Suzanne Humphreys come with us on the Vax Bus. I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, just as COVID was happening. And of course, both of them had a terrible problem with the government here, and they were banned from Australia. It's a disgrace what happened to them. So I can talk about the Vax Bus, but the Forest of the Fallen is what a lot of people are now seeing on my X profile. The Forest of the Fallen consists of 700 flags, we call them, but basically they're laminated PDFs with the stories of the people who've been injured or died. Their families have submitted stories of their deaths. We laminate these pages and we post them on bamboo sticks. And every weekend we take our kit off to another Northern Beaches site and we plant the forest in the sand. And that's where I do the interviews. So I've had quite an unusual, I would say it's been pretty much a unique experience of combining the Forest of the Fallen and the Vax Bus. It's been very interesting seeing the difference between the two situations. When it comes to the Vax Bus, we identify the sites we're going to, and we've done the South Coast, and we've done 2 tours where we've done 10 or 12 stops on each tour. And people email through booking in a 20-minute segment where they can talk with us. And obviously, sometimes it takes 10 minutes and sometimes it can take an hour. But we do the recordings of these. We're very slowly getting these out there. It's a slow process, but we're run only by volunteers, and it's very difficult getting the technological help that we need. But the stories I hear on the Vax Bus are usually very, very dire stories of people whose babies have been vaccine injured. Obviously, COVID has been a massive one as well, but there's the whole smorgasbord of injuries that appear on the Vax Bus. However, at the Forest of the Fallen, it seems to be much more COVID-centric, unsurprisingly, because as you and your listeners probably know, Australia behaved in a very bizarre manner during the COVID times. And, you know, we had situations where the police in Melbourne shot people who were protesting against the shutdowns with rubber bullets. We had very harsh shutdowns. In fact, I think Melbourne was the longest shutdown of anywhere in the world. Where I live in Sydney, we didn't escape the madness, but I'm nearly 71 now, I haven't got a job, and I was able to simply not comply with anything. I got the heads up very early on in March 2020 that what was happening was all wrong. I'd had my suspicions about a lot of things for the previous 10 or 12 years. And as far as vaccinations go, I got pericarditis after a flu vaccination, which was the first one I ever had, and that was in 2016. And I realized then that it had been a very poor choice on my part. But lots of other things happened within my family, which I don't really like to talk about. But I realized that childhood vaccinations were a serious risk as well. And obviously, since more has come to light and I've investigated more, I'm totally with you, Jeremiah. I'm a total
abolitionist. Yeah.
Abolitionist.
Yeah, we got to get everyone used to saying that now. We're not anti-vaxxers anymore. We're vaccine abolitionists.
No, absolutely. And I tell you, all you have to do is spend a day on the Vax Bus and you hear the results of, I have so many stories. I've only put a very small number of them on my X page because, I sort of limit those ones to 2 minutes each. And I've been astonished that since I've been doing that, my following has doubled. So it's obviously hitting something. But, to my amazement, there are still people who accuse me of lying, which I find unbelievable. When you listen to the testimonies of people, I mean, why would we be doing this if we were lying? It's simply out of horror and concern that this is continuing, and it is still continuing. I know people who've had 8, 9, 10 vaccinations, and people go around to the old people's homes here on the northern beaches, of which there are many, and just keep vaccinating the old people. And these people sincerely are on board with it. They're even inclined to shun their fellow residents if they haven't taken the latest vaccine. So that's indicative of just the brainwashing that still is occurring.
Yeah.
But people are waking up, Jeremiah. You'll be pleased to hear.
Yeah,
You'll be pleased to hear they are waking up.
I am pleased to hear that, and I do feel that people are waking up, and we need to accelerate that process. So you answered my second question a little bit there in terms of describing your own personal history with the pericarditis, and I'm very sorry to hear about that. What could you tell us? I mean, I know you have too many stories to relay to us in terms of the type of activism you've been doing. I'm sure there's just far more than you could even convey in the remaining program. But give us an overview, if you could, about the types of injuries that you're coming across, and if you notice any patterns or what jumps to mind when you think about some of the stories that you've gathered from the injured.
Well, that's a really interesting side of this whole situation, because it's been so carefully and cleverly done that these injections hit your weakest point, and I think everyone's starting to realize that. However, there's a very brilliant woman here called Sharon Cousins, and she has done what is known as open DAEN, which is like theirs. And she's a statistician who's incredibly patient and incredibly thorough. She's identified batch numbers. And when we went on this last Vax bus trip, I had I had the honor of meeting 2 people. One was a man called Peter Furlonger, who's perfectly happy for me to say his name, and the other was a woman called Tennille, who both got the same batch. And this batch was particularly poisonous, and this has been identified by Sharon, that it's injured and killed a lot of people. It's these kind of stories that really highlight how sinister this has been. And I actually, both Peter and Tennille are in the Forest of Fallen. They're represented there with their own stories. And I just was in contact with Peter's wife just yesterday, actually, with this in mind. And I thought I could tell you exactly what happened to him as an indication of the sort of horror that people are enduring. And bear in mind that Tennille, who's a young 37-year-old, she was an assistant a vet assistant, lovely young woman, perfectly healthy. She took the same batch, and she has 143 very unpleasant and some of them life-threatening side effects. But I'll just give you a rundown of Peter's story. His wife had to write this out because his memory has gone. He's very, very scrambled now, which is, well, to meet him, you wouldn't know that, but he actually said to me, I must get Donna to do this for me because my memory is not good. So Peter was 55 when all this came about. They have a son called Lockie who's autistic. I imagine that his autism was probably from the vaccination as well, but I haven't asked that. However, he was doing remedial swimming, and in September 2021, Peter was made to take the Pfizer vaccine so he could continue taking Lockie to a pool. I mean, it's just too ridiculous for words. So September, he took one and he seemed okay. But then in October, I think it was only 3 weeks later, he took the second. He found his chest started behaving in a way he hadn't seen before or felt before. He had trouble seeing a cardiologist because they were so busy. And he saw several, none of whom would identify what had happened to him. Finally, he saw someone who said, you're just going to have to live with this because it looks like you're in the early stages of heart failure. His symptoms progressed to burning calves, which turned out to be peripheral artery disease in his leg. By 2025, his symptoms were so severe that he undertook EECP, for 7 weeks, which meant he was away from his family in Melbourne, getting some treatment so he could walk more than 50 metres before becoming completely breathless. Unfortunately, that didn't work, and to continue with that treatment was going to cost him $14,000, which he couldn't afford. He then started finding he was bleeding from the bowels, and he's had precancerous polyps removed now, and he's now getting diverticulitis, which is extremely painful and very unpleasant, and of course needs courses of antibiotics. Prior to this, he was never sick. I mean, to meet him, he looks a very fit, energetic man, but now he's on so many medications. He gets sores on his arms that don't heal. He has bruising. He has high D-dimer, which is blood clots, little blood clots. He gets swollen lymph nodes in his groin, and his pain there is significant. He now has high IgGI. He's on supplements that are costing him $500 a month. He can't work. They had to sell their house because they couldn't pay the mortgage. He finds he can't even mow the lawns. His wife is having to do all the heavy work around the property. His eyes have deteriorated, and all through this, he's had no government assistance or even recognition. And this is something I see all the time. Every single person who I have interviewed or talked about this with, who've discussed their injuries, has either not reported it to the TGA, or they have, and it's been dismissed. Our TGA is the place you report vaccine injuries to. It's been a horror show, Jeremiah, and I'm constantly contacted by people who just tell me the saddest stories. You know, I had a phone call the other day from a woman whose 37-year-old son, who'd taken 2 vaccines so that he could go to hospital to witness the birth of his baby. He arrived at Perth Airport and he dropped dead of cardiac arrest. And she said, he and I used to watch the football together. Honestly, it makes me cry talking about it. And now I have his ashes next to me while I watch the game. I mean, these stories just cut me to the quick.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what we've all experienced globally. And first of all, I want to thank you so much for getting up so early in the morning, because I know you are a day ahead of us. So it's really early over there, and thank you so much for.
It's my pleasure. Actually, I've just noticed that the cicadas have started squeaking, so I hope that's not interfering with the sound.
Oh, no, not at all. That would be a charming little effect if we could hear some of that, but we can't, unfortunately.
It's 25 degrees here already, and we're doing a forest of the fallen at Bilgola Beach, and they're anticipating it hitting 37 today, so it's going to be a big day down at the beach. But we persevere because on hot days, young families come to the beach with their little ones, and I'm really very upset to see what they're doing to our kids here. They're now putting out Vaxelis. They started in 2023, which is the combination of six diseases they're pumping into babies from 6 weeks. Of course, they're still doing the Hep B at birth, but at 6 weeks they get a dose of, as you're probably aware, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, Hep B, polio, and Hib at 6 weeks old, and then they do it again to the babies at 4 months, and then at 6 months. It just makes me so sick thinking about it. We have 15% of 6-year-old boys here in Australia now on a disability program because they're on the spectrum. Every grandmother I know seems to have a grandchild who is on the spectrum or has ADHD. I personally know a friend of mine has 2 children with ADHD, and she's a very good friend of mine. She knows what I do, and she knows my view on vaccinations, but she can't attribute the ADHD that both her children suffer from, and it's actually quite severe. They're on medication. She doesn't attribute it to the vaccination, and this is a problem we're seeing still. However, I'm pleased to say that young parents who I meet at the beach, I always try to speak when we're doing the forest. I always try to catch young parents, particularly ones with new babies, to have a word with them and just say, look, I describe what happened to my family, and that usually captures their attention. And then I'm able to say, look, please look into it. Have a look at Suzanne Humphrey's book. Even if you don't buy the book, check it up on Amazon and just read the reviews, and that might give you enough to pause before you get your beautiful little one vaccinated again. But here in Australia, to go to childcare, they mandated the children to take the injections or they wouldn't be accepted. And the interesting side of that was Elizabeth Hart, who's again a very big advocate for banning this mandated for children, banning mandates for everyone, in fact, banning the damn injections altogether. Elizabeth Hart, H-A-R-T, she's an Australian. So they mandated these for children in 2015. And the most disgusting part of this is that Rupert Murdoch, who you will all know, basically runs the media here in Australia. He
and
approached
elsewhere.
Scott Morrison. He approached Scott Morrison, who had ambitions for prime ministership in 2015, and at the time he was running the sort of childcare side of things in Australia. I can't remember what the portfolio was called, but it was over that area, and this is conjecture, but it all adds up. He said to Scott Morrison, "I will get you to be prime minister if you mandate for children to be vaccinated to go to childcare." By coincidence, I'm sure his son was on the board of GlaxoSmithKline, and his mother was the person who initiated children's medical research here in Australia, which is basically a hub for vaccination. And hey presto, we suddenly all had to get our children vaccinated. And can't be surprised he became prime minister. How could that be? So this is the sort of corruption that we're seeing, and the people who are suffering are the families. One of the saddest stories I heard on the Vax bus, we were at a New South Wales town called Yass. That was actually where I heard a lot of horrible stories. And this lady came to see me. I think her name was Barbara. She would have been 75-ish, I suppose. And she was very matter of fact. She sat down, and I'm hoping that particular video will be posted soon. She said, I had a daughter, Bernice. She's now 47. She was a beautiful 6-month-old baby, and I took her to the doctors, and they said, you need to vaccinate her. And she said, as soon as little Bernice was vaccinated, something happened to her and she became incredibly floppy. She said she just was a different child. And I took my baby home, and the older siblings all said, what's wrong with Bernice? She was never the same, and she was obviously severely damaged and is now completely very, very autistic. And she said, I've changed Bernice's nappies several times a day for 47 years. I mean, that again was just a horrible story. Another story from that trip was another really lovely young woman. She had 2 sets of twins. And her first set, she had 2 little girls. And she took them at one to the doctor. And she looked at the records quite a long time afterwards to realize that one of them she thinks got 2 vaccinations and the other didn't get any. And the little one that got 2 vaccinations is a completely fully autistic child. And this young mother has devoted her life. She said, I am determined to live longer than my daughter, so I never have to have anyone else change her nappy. Another one changing her nappy. People are trying to purport autism as some kind of advantage, and how we should accept the diversity. Neurodiversity is the latest thing.
Yeah.
Well, speak to a mother who's changed 47 years worth of nappies and find out how much she enjoys neurodiversity. And I think you'll find they're not enjoying it very much. And the waste of that little girl's life, it is the greatest hoax ever perpetrated on humanity. And to pretend it's otherwise is just an outrage.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you mentioned Dr. Suzanne Humphreys. I'm reading the latest edition of Dissolving Illusions. It's an incredible book. I strongly recommend everyone get their hands on a copy. And we need to get educated in this history. One thing that jumped out at me, I'm still, plowing through the book. It's quite a dense text. It's a great read, but it's a lot of information. It's over 600 pages. I'm about halfway through it. And I was just reading about, for one thing, the riots that have happened on account of vaccine mandates going back to the 19th century, we've been sort of disconnected from the fact that there's a rich history of people resisting precisely vaccines and vaccine mandates. It's actually not a new struggle. They've sort of succeeded in
No.
disconnecting us from that history. But another thing that's fascinating is reading so many accounts from doctors from the previous century and even before who were speaking out against vaccination, including, I remember reading, I don't know the name of the doctor offhand, but I'm thinking of a passage I read just a couple days ago where a doctor was certain that vaccination would stop as a practice for its sheer ineffectiveness. He thought, well, people are going to notice pretty soon this is a completely useless and actually dangerous practice. But here we are, 100, almost, I don't know how many, a century and a half later, basically. That
One of the kings of
yeah.
England, I wish I could remember which one it was. It was the one who went mad. I think that was George III, the madness of King George. He had 12 children, and his youngest 3 were vaccinated against smallpox and promptly died. And that, they attribute his madness to some kind of hormonal disruption. But I think he went mad because 3 of his children were murdered by injection. They had the smallpox. I mean, when you think of the disgusting practice of scraping pus off pustules of people infected with something and then poking it into your skin through a cut. I mean, how surprising people are unwell. I think it was the town of Leicester in the UK that absolutely revolted against it, and they virtually expunged all sign of smallpox. Apparently, smallpox wasn't even that serious. I mean, no one likes getting pustules all over them, but chickenpox is the same. Oh, chickenpox, that's another issue for me. They're now combining that with the MMR. Andrew Wakefield was just recently talking about it, and he said that, this is an absolutely outrageous idea. I think it's coming out more and more that childhood diseases have benefits. Children who get infected with all the classic childhood diseases end up with long-term better heart health, better vascular health, because these diseases prime their system to strengthen. And it's even been observed by some parents that after a measles infection, their children developmentally seem to be progressing much faster than prior to the infection. So, I mean, our bodies were designed in such a way, and God made us in such a way. It is beyond clever how we were designed, and to be interfering with it in this fashion is insanity. Every single day when I'm out and about, I notice people's children. And when my children were born in 82 and 84, they escaped the 86 lack of liability for injection. And I went off the idea of injecting them more out of the fact they seem so healthy. And I thought, look, whatever they get, I'm sure they'll be okay. So I didn't vaccinate them, and I didn't give them a lot of antibiotics either, because antibiotics were expensive. And I knew parents at that time who thought they were being good parents by injecting their children with penicillin as soon as they had a green nose. And I reflected on my own childhood and thought, well, I'm really healthy. I didn't take penicillin every time I had a green nose. I got over it. So my boys were both, very, very healthy. And then it was really almost immediately after that, this whole ADHD thing started becoming a thing. I have a sister who's a psychologist, and she has confirmed this, that the children, in the sort of very late 80s and early 90s was when things started to go seriously pear-shaped. And I have friends who, one family in particular, who I've always been close to, they're childhood friends. They had 2 children born the same year as my 2 boys. They subsequently had a 3rd child in 1990. And this little one was vaccinated with everything because we were all believers, of course. We never doubted that they did all the right kind of research to make sure they were keeping us safe. Never doubted it. Anyway, this boy, at 18 months, he got a huge whack of injections and became what they called was regressive autism. Isn't that a quaint way of saying we just half murdered your child and sent him backwards? Regressive autism. Oh, it's very bad luck to get regressive autism, but it does happen. Well, this child, beautiful, very handsome, huge, strapping, healthy young man, is very severely autistic. And his brother, who's the age of my son, which is 44, I speak to him occasionally. He said, "Thank God you're doing what you're doing, Rosie, because David's life was a complete catastrophe, and it was totally avoidable." So every time I go up to young parents, and this is something I do regularly, I'll approach young parents, and get talking about their babies and say what a gorgeous baby, because they always are. I love babies. And then I'll tell them my story, and I say this with this young David in mind, remembering how it broke up his parents' marriage and destroyed the family. I mean, these catastrophes have such a rippling effect. Now they're saying that in California, where they're absolutely obsessed with jabbing everything that moves, it seems, they're anticipating every second little boy will be autistic by the year 2030. Well, the ramifications of that, well, are any parents going to be able to work? What's the workforce going to be? Is this some sinister move towards the universal basic income because no one can work because they're looking after children who've been damaged by injection? I mean, it's a pretty sinister take on the situation, but I have to say that's occurred to me, that this is a step in the direction of complete control of everyone, because they've sickened everyone to the degree that no one can work.
Yeah, I think you're really onto something there. And we had on this program one of my most popular guests, Dr. Toby Rogers, who points out that there's no such thing as a genetic epidemic. We're clearly dealing with environmental factors. Something is interfering with the formative development of young people unlike anything we've ever seen. And it's amazing that the people who deny vaccine injury and deny the vaccine autism link, they're totally disinterested in resolving any of these problems and finding out, well, what is the cause of all this stuff that we're observing? They're only interested in defending the vaccine industry, which...
Do you think...
Go ahead.
Sorry, Jeremiah. Sorry, yeah. I can talk the leg off a chair when I get going.
No, I'd love to hear what you have to say.
Peter Hotez has an autistic child himself.
Right.
I've met parents with autistic children. I'm always very careful not to say too much, which is why I don't delve into it when people don't volunteer that they think it came from the injection. I have a good friend, Michael Sims, who's very active here, and he comes on the Vax bus and helps a lot with the tech side of things. His little boy was 1 year old, and on his birthday, he took him off for his vaccinations, took him home, and the child was never the same again and has been diagnosed as severely autistic. The doctors told him, the father, "Oh, yes, your son's allergic to the latex balloons at his party." I mean, for God's sake, how pathetic. But I've spoken about this with Michael and said that I meet people occasionally, and I met one just recently, completely on board about the COVID vaccination, absolutely convinced that COVID vaccination has been bad, but completely okay with the childhood vaccination, and his own daughter is autistic. So the human mind, I never dreamt that people could create such barriers to knowledge out of some form of self-defense. And we do see that with both, well, we see it in every facet of this vaccine disaster. Parents who can't bear to think that they took their child off, held the baby down, let them jab it with a poison, and then the outcome was diabolical. And people, again, I see this with the COVID vaccine. I had a very curious conversation with a man called John, it must have been a year ago. And he came and spoke to me, and he was looking at the flags, and he said, "Oh, it looks like I dodged a bullet, because we put the people who've tragically been killed by these injections in the front row with a black ribbon on them." And he walked past, he said, "Oh, look at this. These 4 people have all died. I've had 3, and I'm still here." And I said, "Oh, that's great." You know, I actually said to him, "You actually look quite well too. That's wonderful that you're okay." And then he looked at me and he said, "Well, actually, I'm not okay." And I said, "Oh, sorry to hear that." And he said, I went to my doctor for my usual test, and he said, "Oh, your PSA's up. You might need to look at your prostate." So they looked at his prostate and they said, "Oh, yeah, you've got prostate cancer." So he said, "Oh, well, you know, that's common." And they said, "Oh, we can help with that." And then he had to go back again. You know, they found he had cancer in his brain and in his lungs. And I said to him, "Oh, that's absolutely terrible. You know, what a shock for you." And he looked at me and with absolute sincerity, he said, "You don't think it was from the vaccine, do you?" And I said to him, well, I can't tell you that one way or the other, but do you think it might be a bit of a coincidence that you've been perfectly healthy until now? You took 3 vaccines and now you've got 3 forms of cancer?
Yeah.
And he said, oh, well, I think you might be right. So, I mean, this is a very curious human condition where people are in, there's a term for it.
Cognitive dissonance,
No,
denial.
a disability to attribute something to something you've done to yourself, I guess is probably the summary of it. But, I do see this. However, the people who, oh God, some of these things are just so sad. I never forget the faces of people. And someone's just sprung to mind that her name's Ellie. She's 37 and she's completely crippled by this. And she's, gaslit. They're all gaslit by the doctors. They're all given anxiety medication and told they're anxious. Anyway, Ellie is just still not compensated, and she's had demyelation of her spine, and she's got transverse myelitis.
That's so painful.
She contacted me the other day, and she said, Rosie, I just want to get some compensation for my family, and I want to die. I've just been to the dentist. And he said, your mouth is like an 80-year-old. All my teeth are crumbling and falling out. And that's something else I've been hearing a lot of. I've met people who tell me about either they or people they know have got necrosis of the jaw, which sounds like fun, doesn't it?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
That's when your jaw starts crumbling.
Right.
And I
hate to even say this. This is so horrible to even discuss all of these injuries. We had a report just yesterday in Stop the Shots about a woman suffering from necrosis of the vagina.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
Oh, all these stories keep springing into my mind. Tell me to leave it if I'm going on too much. But,
no, not at all.
I also heard from a man, he married a Thai woman, and the marriage broke up, and she took the little girl back to Thailand. She was 6, and he begged her not to get her vaccinated, but she wouldn't listen to him. And the little girl had 3 Moderna shots, and she went straight into puberty.
Yeah. I mean, just so many accounts of injury. And as I pointed out, for people who don't believe this is going on, at this point, we have several categories of evidence at this point. It's not just like we're pointing to one thing or the other. We have several different categories of overwhelming evidence. And at the top of the heap, we have the firsthand accounts of the vaccine injured. And it just blows me away. A good friend of mine who is also a guest on this program, Scott Austin, I call him the conspiracy theorist masseur. If you need a great massage, please email me and I'll get you in contact with Scott Austin, who lives on Central Park North. But great guy, guest of this program, and he's been talking about this stuff for years, even before COVID, long before COVID. And he asked people, well, do you trust the government? And they'll say, well, no, I don't trust the government. Then he'll say, well, do you trust the pharmaceutical industry? And they'll say, well, no, I don't. And then he'll say, well, then why do you sound like an attorney for the pharmaceutical industry? It's strange.
Bizarre. Actually, one of my greatest detractors who now has I've got a whole page dedicated to discrediting me, not that I care. I mean, the funny thing
that means you're on the right track. I need a page like that.
I'm completely unmoved by their comments. It's quite interesting. I mean, I'm not completely insensitive, but the attacks I get about my makeup, my appearance, I mean, God, I'm 71. Do they seriously think I care about what they think I look like? I mean, I find it almost laughable that they think that's going to injure me somehow and make me shut up. I just think, oh, you're absolute lunatics. This is so much bigger than me. And I just can't stop now that every time I see a baby, and I see children behaving in a way that is clearly indicative of a vaccine injury. These children who keep running around in restaurants, I look at them and I think you can't reason with them.
Yeah.
I was recently at a dinner with some friends of ours, and their little boy, he's 7 now. He's I mean, he would have been considered a recalcitrant child in normal times, just a naughty little boy. You'd say, go to your room and think about how you've behaved.
Yeah.
You could not reason with this child.
Yeah.
He got a football inside the house and he kept kicking him, and it didn't matter what we did, he wouldn't stop. And he was completely obstreperous. But I could see it wasn't him. It was something had been done to him that had angered him in such a way. I just see it so much with these children behaving like this, and there's nothing you can do to reason with them.
Yeah.
The other thing, the mother with the twin that I mentioned to you, these children who've been badly injured by injections often become really peculiar about food, and they will not eat anything other than junk food. And this twin apparently has become hugely obese, and there's nothing the mother can do because the girl, I think she's 18 now, and she's something like 130 kilos. And the mother said, look, we simply cannot get her to eat anything healthy. Something goes wrong with them. So their situation is compounding all the time with the injury.
Yeah.
And this little one that I mentioned before, who was very difficult, he was the same. He was really picky about his food and very difficult about everything, just difficult about everything. The mother said, oh, I'm glad I got a daughter because daughters are easy. And that was interesting because her daughter was born during the lockdowns in Melbourne where she couldn't go and have her wellness visit. So the child was protected from getting jabbed and she was absolutely fine.
Wow. Yeah, I can corroborate what you're saying in terms of the behavior of children. I'm an educator. I've taught chess in schools for over 20 years. As soon as this broadcast ends, I'm going to the lovely state of New Jersey to go teach a chess class. And I've noticed a definite change over the 2 decades I've been teaching, where in the past, and I even remember from my own childhood being an elementary school student, that if the teacher firmly said, everyone be quiet, we need to get focused or whatever, the statement would normally buy the teacher a good at least 10 or 15 minutes of relative peace in the class, a reset, if you will. But nowadays, it's just a vague suggestion. While you're saying, could everyone please be quiet? Even if you're speaking firmly, there are kids just talking over your request to be quiet, and they just continue their discussions as though nothing was stated to them, like they have no respect for authority or for the order of the classroom. And it's been noticeable in my experience. But we only have 10 minutes or so. So I would like to, first of all, tell us, Rosie, how can people follow you on X? How can people support your work? How can people keep track of Forest of the Fallen as well as the Vax Bus? And also, when you're done telling us how we can follow you and support you, give us, if you could, just a little pep talk, because I'm really feeling that we're in a critical time. I guess we're always in a critical time, but right now, around this issue, there's really good information circulating. There are a lot of unsung heroes, such as yourself, who are doing really tremendous work to address this issue. How do we keep forward momentum? How do we get more people involved in this?
Well, I'm not. I have no ambition to be an internet sensation or anything. So I've got a very obscure Twitter handle, which I'll give you, and I've suddenly doubled my following, which is absolutely astonishing to me. It's Rosie with a capital R and capital M 1276203. Apologies for it being such a bizarre one.
No, I'm looking at it right now. Rosie M 1276203. And I know you're not an attention seeker in any way whatsoever, Rosie, but I think the more people are aware of what you're doing, then the better off the world is, because you're out there spreading the truth. You're getting firsthand accounts from people, which are some of the most powerful words that we can hear. It's just what people have been through in their own experience. And I'm looking at your profile picture, and you're a lovely looking lady. Anyone trying to insult your appearance is just really grasping for straws at that point.
Well, I can tell you it doesn't bother me. Well, as far as getting the word out, I've also, look, I haven't mentioned this, but I started, I think it was about, actually, it was the beginning of people taking an interest in what I'm doing. Um, 3 years, was no, it was my son's in London. One of my sons, his little girl, well, that must have been 3 years ago because she was 6. She was at school in London, and they were at a little school where there were a lot of those kind of social justice warrior parents there. And this stupid parent took her 6-year-old child, little girl, off to be vaccinated, and she took a Pfizer vaccination, and the little one died during the night. And my son was just so upset. He said there's an empty desk in the classroom where this child had sat. And you can imagine the trauma that everyone went through. But of course, no one's, they tried to say, oh, she'd been unwell before, which of course is a bloody lie, as anyone with sentient brain cell would know. For a child to just die in the night unexpectedly, you know, that's just too ridiculous in my book. Anyway, I think it was the next day, I was up at a shopping centre and I walked past this pharmacy that had come in and get your COVID vaccine, come and get, there was a smorgasbord of vaccines, including bloody Japanese encephalitis, if you felt like a bit of a change. You know, come in and get shot up with everything. Anyway, I just saw red, and I went in there, and actually, it's on my Twitter page. I went in there and said, "Do you realise what you're doing? Do you understand that people are dying from these vaccines?" And I filmed it. Anyway, I never actually put it out there. It was a year later that I actually posted it. And the only reason I did post it was I was holding a forest of the fallen just nearby to that pharmacy, and I thought, oh well, this will get some people to come and help me, perhaps. And it was a funny thing, actually, because I was obviously in bed. It was the middle of the night, and my phone started ringing. And Jackie Devoy, who's a journalist in England, was ringing me saying, would you come on my show in 2 hours' time? And I said, it's the middle of the night here in Australia. She said, oh, yes, but will you come on my show in 2 hours' time? And it was because she'd seen this video. And since then, a lot of other people have started doing what I do, and I've done lots of them. In fact, I think it's the pinned on my Twitter page. One of the pinned ones is a chemist video where it was just nearby to here, and it wasn't long ago. I went into the pharmacy and I said to the pharmacist, "Oh, my 89-year-old mother is wondering whether she should have the combination of the flu
Yeah, I saw
vaccine
that
with her
video. That was excellent what you
yeah,
did.
her seventh COVID injection." Oh, she said, yes, that's safe. And I said, well, how do you know it's safe? Oh, the evidence is all there. Just look on the internet, Google it, you'll be fine. Everything's fine. Go, bring her in, let me jab her up. She said, oh, she might have a sore arm the next day. And I thought, yeah, she'll bloody well be dead, poor woman. Anyway, I haven't got an 89-year-old mother, but I just thought I'd see what happened. And, you know, every now and then I'll ring pharmacies and ask them about, you know, I'll say, look, I'm 8 months pregnant. Do I need a booster? Well, I haven't done that in the last 6 months, but 6 months ago they said, oh, yeah, come in and have a booster. I mean, this is reckless, absolutely reckless behaviour. And I think if people start doing that, I mean, you don't have to do what I do. You don't have to film it. Just go in there and say, do you seriously think it's a good idea to give out these anymore? John Leake says that anyone who's taken any more of these injections is insane. And I have to say, I agree with him. These Peter McCullough's sidekicks play right together. I mean, you would have to be mad now with so much evidence. But I think if we go to the source and walk into the pharmacy and say, are you seriously still doing this? Have you looked into liability? Because certainly the Australian government isn't going to cut. If people can ascertain who gave them the injection, and when they go back and say, look, say you went to your doctor and got 3 vaccinations and then had a really serious outcome, and you went back to the doctor and you said, I really want you to report this to the TGA because I'm really sick now and I think it's the injection. Apparently, and I'm only saying this I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, but I tell you, but it'd be worth a try, saying I will take you to court if you don't put that down and submit my problem to the TGA. I think people should really start arcing up. But, you know, the problem with that is that most people went to, you know, sort of Walmart or Bunnings or somewhere and got a jab, so they can't attribute it to the vaccinator. But look, we've just got to start speaking up. And even if you just go in and as I said to them, say, look, you're mad to be doing this. If someone's injured, you could well find yourself liable. Certainly, informed consent has not been adhered to. Informed consent has several components. Firstly, there should be no coercion. Well, clearly being mandated is coercion, so they should never have stuck a needle in anyone who was mandated. Secondly, you were supposed to be told all the alternatives, and of course we did have alternatives, but they weren't told. And thirdly, you were supposed to be told of every risk, and there's 1,296 Pfizer adverse events. Well, anyone who's giving out 100 injections a day wasn't doing that. It would have taken all day to describe one lot of, to one person. So clearly all the codes of decency have been violated, and we've got to start speaking up about it and stop being so shy about saying it. I mean, I get some blowback every now and then, but what's more important, our children or having hurt feelings? Well, nothing hurts my feelings anymore. I couldn't care less about hurt feelings. The other thing that works is Forest for the Fallen. That is being recognised, certainly here in Australia amongst the Awake group. That is something that hits home because you actually don't have to say anything. I mean, a lot of the time I just sit there and wait for people to come and talk to me. But they walk past and something registers and it sows a seed. So even if you just collected, say, 20 stories and planted them somewhere and sat and discussed it with people, I think that would be a start. It really, really does work. And I've done hundreds of interviews and spoken to thousands of people now. I've been doing this now for, I think it's 2.5 years with the forest. But I don't forget the stories.
Yeah, that's truly remarkable. Yeah, my son, who's only 8 years old, and we have 1 minute to go, but my son, he told me that he was explaining to people that vaccines are bad, and I was kind of surprised. I didn't tell him to go out and speak about this, but he said that vaccines are bad and that people argued with him and said, no, vaccines are good. And he said, no, my daddy is with a team of people and they're fighting the bad people who are making people take poisonous vaccines. And I said, well, who are you telling this to? And he said, to the whole class.
Oh, wow. He's my boy. Jeremiah, I love your Substack. I love that 100 questions for for pro-vax. And I love Stop the Shot. And thank you so much for always letting me come on there. I really appreciate the support. And I think you are amazing. And I'm really, really thrilled we met. Very lucky we met.
Well, likewise, the admiration is mutual. I'm a huge fan of yours. Anytime you can join us on Stop the Shots, we're thrilled to have an update from you. You are a top-notch activist and individual, and I really hope more people become aware of what you're doing and help spread the word. And yeah, folks, we're in the fight of our lives, so we need more people to just try to figure out little ways that they can do more. And one thing that you can always do is you can help to amplify the voices of people who are speaking out, such as this radio program, such as Forest of the Fallen, and any number of previous guests who are engaged in incredible initiatives like my co-host Julie Threet, who had another incredible outing yesterday. They're confronting sheriffs now. They've spoken to many board of supervisor groups, and now they're going to the sheriffs and asking them to fulfill their constitutional oath. So we're out of time, everyone. I want to thank you so much, Rosie Marshall. Keep up the great work. Looking forward to talking with you again soon. Everyone have a great weekend. And please join us on Stop the Shots tonight. We're there every night on the X platform. And of course, the next Rock Mill Fitness Jam is January 25th. That's 274 Lenox Avenue, which I didn't mention earlier. 274 Lenox Avenue between 124th and 123rd. Everyone have a great weekend. Peace and love.